Hello, everybody. Welcome to this We Did It Health event. At We Did It Health, we're working to create a healthy, happy, vegan, and plant based world. We're doing that through building community and offering resources such as today's discussion to help you create relationships where you plant seeds of hopeful curiosity in others. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we also invite you to join our Facebook communities. Check us out also at wedidit.health so you can connect with others and find support and encouragement with like-minded members. My name is Mariquita Solis, and I'm super excited to welcome author of Food is Climate and America Goes Vegan, Glen Merzer, to today's program. And everybody that's watching, please give StreamYard permission to use your name, and we want to see your questions and comments. So welcome, Glen. Thanks for joining us. You always are. You have so much information that we need to hear.
Thank you, Mariquita. It's good to be with you. So I'll give a talk now about why animal agriculture is the leading cause of our climate emergency and why we don't hear enough about it. And having written the book Food is Climate, and I'm not a Scientologist. I'm not a scientist or a climatologist or a Scientologist. Um, uh, it it shows how really easy this is to figure out. Because if I could figure it out, anybody can. Now, I got an email yesterday from a newsletter sent out by my friend Dr. Silas Rao, and the newsletter is from his organization, climatehealers.org. And I advise everyone to please check out climatehealers.org and sign up for their newsletter. Silas writes some brilliant emails as his newsletter. And yesterday he wrote one about the top 10 mass delusions in modern industrial societies. And he elucidated the differences between these mass delusions and what he called the biophysical realities. So let me go over in my own words his top 10 delusions. And some of them I am willing to go into in more depth than others. I think he put them in something of reverse order, with number one the greatest. So like David Letterman's old top 10 list, we'll start with number 10. Number 10, only humans have souls, while other animals are soulless automatons. I'm not going to go into any depth on this. I think it's just the hubris that humans have that only our lives matter. And certainly when you think of animals like elephants that live a long time and have great intelligence and apparently have the ability to call each other by name and mourn, certainly it seems to me that other animals may well have souls. Number 9, animals don't suffer in the dairy and egg industries. And I think Silas mentions this because there are some people out there who are vegetarians rather than vegans. And they say, well, I just drink milk and I have eggs, but I wouldn't want to kill an animal. Well, there's an extraordinary amount of cruelty in the dairy and poultry industries. Female hens, Silas writes, are selectively bred to undergo menstruation at such a rapid rate that they secrete 10 to 15 times the number of eggs that they might normally secrete in nature. The cows are kept perpetually pregnant, and then their babies are taken from them so that we could have the milk, and they're chained up in little stalls. There's tremendous cruelty. And then, of course, once they're considered spent cows, after they've been bred to give more milk than they naturally would, then they become hamburger. So they're treated just like other cattle. And so if you take the attitude like, well, I'm just drinking milk, I'm not killing the cow, yeah, you're killing the cow. It's all part of that industry. Eighth delusion is that calcium is found only in dairy products. It's just silly when people think they need to drink milk for the calcium. Where do the cows get the calcium? The calcium comes from plants. So the idea that there is any need for any animal food is mistaken. There are no nutrients in animal foods that you can't get, usually in better form and in more appropriate concentrations from plant foods. So calcium is not found only in dairy products. Similarly, there's number 7. Protein is only found in meat and other animal products. Now, Dr. T. Colin Campbell, in his book, The China Study, gave what should be the nail in the coffin to the argument that we need animal foods for their protein. He proved in his studies that animal protein is carcinogenic. So you don't want to have animal protein, you want to have plant protein. And that is both the nature of the protein. The animal protein is higher in the amino acid methionine, which has been linked to cancer. And also, the animal protein is excessive. You don't want to have excessive protein. In Dr. Campbell's experiments, it was the greater concentration of protein, as well as the fact that it was animal protein rather than plant protein, that led to cancer. So casein, the protein in milk, is particularly carcinogenic, but all animal protein is carcinogenic. And the fact that it's excessive is not good for your body. Everybody out there who believes in protein as being something that you just need more and more of, please listen to this. Excessive protein is not helpful. The human body cannot store protein. So why in the world would you want to take a lot of protein powders and eat animal foods and fill yourself up with protein? You are just excreting it in your urine, and you are just stressing your kidneys. You cannot store it. There's nothing you can do with it. It's a waste of time to chase protein. Um, Babies need protein. Infants need protein more than we do because they're in their most important growth phase. So they have a tremendous need for protein, infants do. And that is satisfied by mother's milk. You know, nature has taken care of this. Nature has provided mother's milk, which has protein for the infants. And the amount of that protein is about 6% of the calories. So certainly we don't need as adults more than 6% of our calories as protein. So you simply don't need much protein. Look at me, I'm a vegan. I haven't had any animal protein in 30 plus years. I'm fine. I'm not falling down. You don't need so much protein. Forget about it. Don't even think about it. It's nonsense. Okay, number 6. Humans are superior to other animals in terms of intelligence. Well, Seilish makes the point that if dogs were to devise intelligence tests, they might base them on sniffing abilities, on their sense of smell, and then say that they're more intelligent than we are. But I'll go further than that. Just Google short-term memory. Short-term memory tests between humans and chimpanzees. And what they did a test where they took a grid with, I think it was 9 numbers, 1 through 9, but instead of being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they arranged it out of order. So imagine if you saw a grid of 9 numbers arranged out of order, 7, 4, 2, 6, 5, and you saw it for a second, and then you're asked, okay, fill in the blanks. Where were those numbers before? You or I would probably be able to remember 2 or 3 or 4 fill in 2 or 3 or 4 boxes in the grid, and then we'd say, we don't know. The chimps remember all 9. They just go boom, 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 and they can do it. So is that the definition of intelligence? Well, it's part of intelligence, isn't it? Short-term memory. They're smarter than we are on that. So, we should view nature with a sense of respect and awe and appreciation of other animals and their unique abilities, and not just assume that we're the only ones who matter. And it's only by assuming that we could do what we've done with the world, which is to destroy it in order to foolishly eat animals. Number 5, the pursuit of happiness necessitates consuming more and more stuff. Well, this is a delusion, of course. I could think from my own life, stuff has never been what's made me happy. The idea of chasing after cars that are have cachet or something, is a foolish way to spend your time. Number 4, some carbon dioxide molecules are emitted more equal than others. And that's because the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has an approach to measuring greenhouse gases and the risks to our future from the climate emergency by concerning themselves very deeply with the carbon dioxide emitted by the burning of fossil fuels, and not concerning themselves at all with carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases emitted by animal agriculture. Now, a carbon dioxide molecule is a carbon dioxide molecule is a carbon dioxide molecule. It doesn't care, and nor should we, in terms of measuring climate effects, whether it came from my breath or the exhaust pipe of a car or the burning of coal. We have to do honest accounting. It's the same darn molecule that traps heat. So what the IPCC says is, well, we're not going to, when we do our accounting for greenhouse gases, we're not going to include animal respiration, because that's just part of the natural cycle of life. The animals emit carbon dioxide, the trees sequester carbon dioxide. Really? No matter how many trees there are, no matter how many animals there are? We have 25 billion farmed animals, and they're exhaling carbon dioxide. The ruminant animals have a process called enteric fermentation, produces methane, which in reality is 120 times as powerful a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide. But the IPCC does some interesting accounting, and they try to reduce that to 28 times. I'll get into that later. But all these greenhouse gases from the animals count. They're in the atmosphere. They're heating the atmosphere. You can't just say, well, an animal is natural. A factory isn't natural, so we're going to count that that carbon dioxide. But a cow is natural, so we're not going to count that. There are 1.5 billion cows in the world. Is that natural? Who made that natural? 1.5 billion cows. Cows themselves, I hate to tell you, but cows themselves are not natural. The original animal was called an ox. And from oxen, humans somehow managed to breed these softer, fattier animals called cows. So the cows themselves are not natural. And it's not natural. What if we had, instead of 1.5 billion, what if we had 10 billion? Would that be natural? I mean, at what point does this stop being natural? It's not natural. Nor is it a natural thing to take 40% of the non-ice land surface of the earth and build fences around it and call it grazing land and chop down the trees and burn the foliage for the cows and the sheep to graze upon it. That's not natural. That's not the way the earth was when we found it, when we evolved. 40% of the earth wasn't chained off just for the animals we eat. So this is profoundly unnatural. So the delusion is that there's some difference between a carbon dioxide molecule coming out of a cow and a carbon dioxide molecule coming out of the end of your car, the tailpipe. Same molecule. Delusion number 3. The Earth is an infinite source of raw materials for our global industrial civilization and an infinite sink for the waste that it produces. Well, we know that that's a very, very bad delusion. We see the landfills that were overflowing. We have these lagoons of manure throughout the United States near these animal farm operations. People who live downwind of a pig operation or a chicken operation suffer the consequences. We are fouling our streams and rivers with the manure and with the nitrogen runoff from nitrogen fertilizer, which is used to grow the grain to feed to the cows, in an example of mass human delusion and stupidity. Delusion number 2, there is an invisible hand that turns the rank self-interest of individuals into the best interests of society. This is Silas writes, there's a common delusion within capitalist societies that greed somehow turns into social well-being through an invisible hand. The biophysical reality is that rank self-interest is destructive to society since it misallocates planetary resources. There are people who just believe in capitalism and the free market, and it will solve all problems. And there's a little bit of a basis for this delusion because the free market does some things well. For example, if we look at our cell phones and we say, what a remarkable device, the technology, we have these little computers in our hands, we can make phone calls, we can text, we could do WhatsApp, we can play video games, whatever. It is a remarkable technology, and I would guess that it would have been less likely to have been created in a communist society. I think the profit motive is probably behind the remarkable achievement that we could create these amazing devices. So once people see that, the free market can do some things well, they then move on to the delusion that the free market will solve everything. And we just should never have governments. We should never have regulations. We should never think beyond what the free market can do. Well, the free market does some things very, very badly. We have a lot of poverty. Without any rules and regulations, even traffic. How would we would all get in traffic accidents if we didn't have some laws and have some stoplights, and if we didn't have minimum wage and we didn't have worker regulations so that workers aren't exploited. We would have even greater poverty and misery out there. And by the way, the industry that exploits workers the most of all the industries in the United States It's the animal meat packing industry. Because what they do is they're employing children. We have child employment regulations in this country. You're not supposed to be employing children, but they break that law regularly. And the way they're able to do it is that we have some, as we all know, many undocumented citizens in the United States. So they take children from Honduras who are 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, struggling to survive. And they sign something that says that they're 18. They show a false ID. And these meatpacking plants are employing 12-year-old children from Honduras to work all-night shifts in dangerous jobs at meatpacking plants, which are the filthiest places in America. And they're cleaning them up overnight, using harsh chemicals to try to clean up the blood and the manure and the filth from these awful industries. And some of them are getting hurt, some of them are getting killed. But who cares about 12-year-old children from Honduras who aren't here legally? So that's their attitude. And we're ruining the lives of children and exploiting children so that people can have meat, which gives them heart attacks. So this is the most exploitative industry in America. And the invisible hand of capitalism will not solve that problem. I'm neither pro or anti-capitalist. I think capitalism does some things well and some things badly. But the idea that you can count on it to overcome all problems is a delusion, obviously. And Silas has as number one, technology will overcome any biophysical limitations on economic growth imposed by a finite planet. He writes, what can we say about this one? The biophysical reality is that billionaires are building spaceships to hightail it out of planet Earth, knowing that this is a delusion. The idea, this faith that we can have unlimited amounts of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and then somehow come up with a machine that's going to gobble up that carbon dioxide and methane, that's silly. The idea that we could rely on technology to solve problems that technology has caused in part is a delusion. But it isn't technology alone that has, and the burning of fossil fuels that has caused our climate crisis. It's the stupidity of the way we eat. There are a number of reasons why we are not focusing on animal agriculture as the leading cause of climate change. And let me read a few of them to you from my new book, America Goes Vegan. There it is. First, there's the visual bias. You can see pollution coming out of smokestacks. You can't see methane exhaled by cows or forests that no longer exist because they've been chopped down to accommodate grazing. You can't see the damage that industrial fishing inflicts upon the ocean. Second, the word pollution itself. We tend to think of pollution as human-made, as something that comes from factories, not from the belching and exhalations of animals or from their waste. Animals are natural, the thinking goes, so how can they pollute? Third, cultural assumptions. Society takes for granted that humans are meat eaters, and so animal agriculture is treated as a necessity that cannot be questioned, whereas the means of creating manufactured goods or of transporting ourselves or even the very necessity of these activities can be questioned. Four, The clear-cut reality that concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere have been on the rise since the dawn of the industrial age and are now increasing faster than ever. It escapes notice that the industrial age has been coincident with a massive increase in deforestation, vastly increased populations of farmed animals, dramatic expansion of grazed areas of the earth, and the creation and spread of concentrated animal feeding operations. We may call it the industrial age, but we could just as well label it the age of industrial killing of animals. Fifth, the entrepreneurial cover that an emphasis on the contribution of fossil fuel burning brings. Just think of all the millions of green jobs we can create with solar and wind technologies. I want to add to Silish's top 10 delusions 3 more. And one of them is that there's an unlimited number of fish in the sea. People think that, oh, the oceans are so vast, teeming with fish, we can just have thousands of these industrial fishing ships casting mile-wide nets and take in as much life out of the ocean as we want, and it'll be back tomorrow. Well, it won't be. And we're killing whales intentionally or not. We're killing dolphins intentionally. This was a point made in the documentary Seaspiracy, which everybody should see. People don't eat dolphins. I don't know why that is. Maybe dolphins don't taste good, or maybe it's just that they're too cute. I don't know, but people don't eat dolphins. So when they cast these mile-wide nets and then they look to see what's in the net, they often get dolphins. Now, you would think that since there's no market apparently for dolphin meat, that they would then take the dolphins they've trapped and just throw them back in the ocean and let them live. That would seem to be what any sane human being would do. But it isn't what they do. They take out their knives and they slit the throats of the dolphins, and then they throw them back in the sea. Now, why do they do that? They do that because the dolphins are competing with them for the tuna. So this gives you an idea of how depraved this industry is. This is a sick industry, the industrial fishing industry. And we're going to have lifeless oceans before long. The second one that I want to add to Silish's list is the idea that certain animals are food animals while others are not. Where do we come up with this? You know, people just accept the culture they're born into. So we accept, oh, we're going to have chicken tonight for dinner, turkey. We're going to have burgers or steaks, bacon. So we accept the idea that certain animals, cows, pigs, sheep, a little less commonly, chickens and turkeys are food animals, and other animals, certainly not our pets, dogs and cats, but not, for example, crows or eagles or raccoons or squirrels are not animals that most people eat. Well, why not? Who decided that some animals are food animals and other animals are not? There's no scientific basis for this. I don't know if there's any basis in taste, that the more people think that cow tastes better than squirrel, or if it's just the economics of the thing, that it's more economical to ranch cows and send them to the slaughterhouse than to ranch squirrels. But there's no scientific basis that some of these animals are food animals and others are not. Nobody's ever done an experiment to show that people are healthier when they eat cows rather than when they eat raccoons. So there is no basis for this. Finally, another delusion is that eating animals signals prosperity. That in the richer nations, there's more eating of animals. It's associated historically with royalty, and that the more successful you get, the more animals you eat, and you eat the more expensive animals like the lobster instead of the sardines. Well, it's not a signal of prosperity. It's a signal of foolishness. When you compare the causes of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, on the one hand, the burning of fossil fuels, and on the other hand, animal agriculture, you have to look at carbon opportunity cost, and you have to look at social goods. So let's start with carbon opportunity cost. Carbon opportunity cost is a way of saying, what if we weren't doing this activity? How much carbon could we sequester? What would be the result to the atmosphere if we didn't do this activity? Well, if we didn't have animal agriculture, that's 40% of the earth that we could rewild. 40% of the non-ice land surface of the earth that we could rewild, and much of that could be forested and full of vegetation, and that would sequester carbon dioxide. Any honest accounting has to include that. You just can't ignore that. And we would be able to sequester enough carbon dioxide, according to peer-reviewed published studies, one by Dr. Silas Rao, that we would be able to reverse climate change just by something like 41% of the non-ice land surface of the earth being reforested. So you must factor in carbon opportunity cost when you're looking at the amount of greenhouse gases caused by an activity, whereas solar panels don't particularly have carbon opportunity cost. When you factor that in, Dr. Rao concluded that animal agriculture is responsible for at least 87% of greenhouse gases. The other thing is you have to look at social goods. Let's think of social goods associated with the burning of fossil fuels. Well, they are many. We have, for example, the airline industry. Whatever you may think of the airline industry, whether or not you like to fly, certainly for many people, it's a social good. People have family and friends all over the world because of the airline industry. They're able to see them. People can travel, see different countries. People sometimes have to travel for business. People travel to see their friends and family. There aren't solar airplanes. We don't have solar airplanes. And when I read something like Bill Gates wrote a book, said we have to get our carbon emissions to zero. Okay, well, he didn't say let's end the airline industry, and he didn't propose a diagram for how he's going to create solar airplanes. So let's be honest about it. Do you want an airline industry or do you not want an airline industry? There are many social goods associated with the burning of fossil fuels. People warm and cool their homes with fossil fuels. People cook with fossil fuels. Now, again, we could move from cooking with gas to cooking with electric and move to clean electricity. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but in the meantime, there are a lot of social goods associated with the burning of fossil fuels. Manufacturing. Think of so many of our manufactured goods, and we wouldn't have them if we weren't burning fossil fuels. So we need to try to limit the burning of fossil fuels. We need to cut it down. We need to try to replace it where we can. But we have to admit that all of us, everyone in America, relies on it for a lot of social goods. Now let's look at the social goods, if we can call them that, associated with animal agriculture. Well, let's see. What do we get from animal agriculture? We get less food because we're feeding more food calories in the form of grains to the animals than we're getting back in calories from eating the animals. So it's not really farming, it's not really food, it's less food. It's costing us food, it's producing hunger. So we don't really get food from it, we get less food from it. We're getting cancer from it, we're getting heart disease from it, we're getting diabetes from it, we're getting autoimmune conditions from it, we're getting less health, we're getting worse health, we're getting obesity from it. So it's destroying our health, it's destroying the rivers, destroying the waterways, destroying the oceans, destroying the climate, and destroying the soil. So there are no social goods associated with animal agriculture. It gives us nothing. It only harms us. So when you're trying to weigh, should we emphasize, as we have been trying to do for 30 years, the burning of fossil fuels and just try to cut back the burning of fossil fuels and then we'll be fine? Or should we emphasize animal agriculture? Well, on the one hand, if we cut out all burning of fossil fuels, we really are going to have all kinds of crises in our society. We won't have manufactured goods and transportation and warming and cooling of our homes for a long, we're trying to transition those things, but that would be a rocky thing to do, to try to rule. If we had a rule that starting next week, no more burning of fossil fuels, you could imagine the chaos. We wouldn't survive. What if next week we said, okay, no more eating animals? What would happen? We'd all get healthier. We'd all live longer. We'd stop going to doctors. We'd stop needing so many pharmaceutical drugs. We'd stop having pandemics. Everything would get better. The air would be cleaner. The temperatures would cool. The planet would cool. The forests would come back. Biodiversity would come back. If we just stopped eating animals tomorrow, everything gets better. Everything. There's nothing that doesn't improve, except, the livelihood of butchers, so they could get another job. So there's no social good associated with animal agriculture. None. Zero. It's foolishness. So with that, I'll conclude my talk. I'll take questions and have a discussion with Mariquita, whatever you want.
All right. Well, thank you for that. It's very shocking, to hear all this, but it's so true, and we are so accustomed to living this way. I see a lot of great comments. JJ from Vegan Knowledge is here. If you're watching, please subscribe to our channel. And JJ's got a great challenge here. We've got Vegan Pundit here saying, agreeing here that the animals we breed for consumption are hardly part of a natural cycle. I know, and so that's the thing. We're just thinking this is natural, but it's not natural. The factory farms are not natural. And these children, I mean, if it's not the children that are working there, who deserves to work there? No one. It's sickening that this is accepted. It's really sad. And we've got another comment here from Vegan Pundit, a free market, a dubious nation.
Notion.
Notion. Yes, Notion. You're right. So,
Yeah, well, that's true.
But
There is no real free market. There never has been. There never will be. But I'm just saying there are ideologues who believe in this, and they imagine that the free market solves all. And it's pretty silly.
right, and it's far easier to just to change our habitary diets for a start. Amen to that. So I always think about the 40% of the planet that's taken up, almost 40% by animal agriculture. So how much of the oceans have we lost, or how? I don't even know what that looks like. I mean, the dead zones. How much of the oceans are dead? And can you talk about that some, please?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, the percentage of the oceans that are dead, but I do know that industrial fishing and animal agriculture are responsible for this. Animal agriculture causes the runoff of the nutrients into the ocean, like nitrogen, and diminishes the oxygen content of the ocean. And then the industrial fishing, um, number one, removes fish and whales, and the excretions of the fish and the whales and the dolphins help feed the phytoplankton populations, and the phytoplankton produce oxygen. So we're destroying the sea forests, which sequester carbon dioxide. We're destroying the phytoplankton. So, and this is all to get 3% of human calories. We're destroying the oceans, which are 70% of the earth, to get 3% of our food calories. Actually, we feed a lot of the fish to the cows. The cows, I think, eat more fish than we do. You might not have known that cows are the greatest ocean predator, but that's what we've turned them into. So, the insanity of all this and the idea that the IPCC could claim that any of this is part of a natural cycle is preposterous.
Oh yeah, it's going against every part of nature. No wonder the Earth is she's stepping up, right? No wonder we're hurting. It's terrible. So, I mean, I even went to a festival last week, a wildlife festival, and tried to talk to a couple of organizations who didn't want to hear anything about it. I tried to talk to them about the animal waste that's going into the rivers and the streams and the oceans, and I just was told, well, the human waste is causing problems too. Well, there's a big difference. Uh, and just not being heard by these big organizations is very, it's terrible. What can we do about this with these organizations that don't want to take responsibility or don't want to even hear? And then they're sitting there in their booths, I mean, handing out information. Here's the list of what to do for our climate, and not one thing about animal agriculture. And just, I don't even know what to say. What would you recommend there?
The film Cowspiracy should have shamed the Sierra Club and these other so-called environmental organizations that ignore animal agriculture. But apparently, they're shameless. So they weren't shamed by it. They continue doing what they're doing. They continue to ignore animal agriculture. And, for 30 years or more, we've been trying to reverse climate change by focusing only on the burning of fossil fuels. And 30 years later, we burn more fossil fuels than we did 30 years ago, and clearly it's not working. So there is no solution mathematically to this problem other than ending animal agriculture. And if you think about it, what if tomorrow we stopped burning fossil fuels somehow? Everything was solar and wind generated. So all our power was solar or clean power. And, we stopped cooking with gas. It was cooking only with electric, and the electricity was generated by solar. What if tomorrow we had a transformation? No more burning of fossil fuels. Would the climate cool? And the answer is no, because you still have 1.5 billion cows belching methane. You still have the animal respiration of 25 billion farmed animals. You still have the nitrous oxide from and methane from the manure. You still have the nitrous oxide from the fertilizer used to grow the grain to feed to the animals. Nitrous oxide is 300 times as potent as carbon dioxide. So even if, to indulge a fantasy, even if we ended animal agriculture, I mean, even if we ended fossil fuel burning, it would have negligible effects on the climate. And we would still have the deforestation, things like the destruction of the Amazon. They're not chopping down the Amazon so they can build solar panels. They're chopping down the Amazon so they can export beef to the United States. They're
Right.
chopping down the Amazon, the lungs of the earth, for animal agriculture. So animal agriculture is far and away the leading cause of climate change.
So I know that you've got to run soon, very soon. We're ending. So can you show us your books, Glenn, and tell us about
Sure.
tell
Okay.
us about your
Well,
books.
this is my latest book, America Goes Vegan. I wrote the text, and Tracy Childs wrote the recipes, and Chef AJ wrote the foreword. And it's just a case. I'm making the case from a number of different perspectives for why we need to go plant-based, from a health, environmental, climate, and spiritual perspective. This is Food is Climate, which is my book that supports the case that Dr. Silas Rao makes, that animal agriculture is responsible for at least 87% of greenhouse gases. And I once said to Silas, there are some things you didn't include in your analysis. He didn't, for example, include, though he's not opposed to including it, but he just didn't feel that, I think he felt that once he got up to 87%, he didn't need to go higher, but he didn't include animal respiration. And he didn't include some factors that are very, very hard to quantify, maybe impossible to quantify. Nobody knows how many pasture maintenance fires there are every year. Pasture maintenance fires are set by all grazing operations, usually on an annual basis. Whatever the cows didn't eat, they burn, so that the bushes and trees don't get in the way of the cows. So it accommodates grazing if it's just all grass. So how much carbon dioxide is going into the atmosphere every year from pasture maintenance fires around the world? Now, when you look at this cover, this is a map of part of the world, you see red. Those red are fires, pasture maintenance fires, in a satellite image on any given day. And you notice the brown areas of deserts, the Sahara, deserts of the Middle East, the desert of northern India, to the Gobi Desert in China. Look at how it's all almost attached. It's all a vast 6,000-mile stretch of desert. How did that happen? Well, 10,000 years ago, that was the cradle of civilization. That's when animal agriculture began. So you see, that's what we've done to the earth with animal agriculture. And the Sahara used to be the Sahara forest, used to be forested. But people started chopping down trees and bringing sheep and goats and cattle onto the land. So the Sahara Desert there are different theories about the creation of the Sahara Desert, and there's something about the wobble of the Earth's axis that may have been involved. but I guarantee you that it was at very least aggravated by, if not largely caused by, human intervention. So that's what we've done to the earth. And do we want to have the Amazonian desert next? The Amazon desert? So that's what happens when you deforest the world and then you put goats and cattle on it that chew up whatever vegetation is left and expose the bare soil. And then there is my book, Own Your Health. Which is a book on nutrition, full of personal anecdotes. And I like to say that I was trying to write the funniest book ever written on nutrition. And if that sounds like bragging, believe me, that's a low bar. There are not many funny books on nutrition.
You're right, they're not. You're right.
So he wrote Vegan Lobbyist Group is Agricultural Fairness Alliance. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with them. I'll have to look them up. Their work is getting changes to the Farm Bill. Okay. Well, I need to learn more about that. So thank you for that. But as far as the Farm Bill goes, we are subsidizing animal agriculture. That's the one thing in America that the Democrats and the Republicans in Congress agree upon. They all want to subsidize animal agriculture. They all want to use your tax dollars to send to ranching operations. That's the one thing they agree on. Chuck Schumer, Ted Cruz, they're in agreement. We should send our tax dollars to the people destroying the climate with cows. So, I wish we could end these subsidies to animal agriculture. Farms, they call them farm subsidies, but they're animal agriculture subsidies. They're not going to people growing organic Brussels sprouts. So I wouldn't oppose farm subsidies if it was going to organic vegetable and fruit growers. But since it all goes to the animal agriculture industry, I oppose it, completely. And we just need to end farm subsidies. That's the simplest way to approach that. End farm subsidies entirely. I thought people believed in the free market. Don't the Republicans believe in the free market? End farm subsidies.
Yes, it's very frustrating. You're right. Of all of our tax dollars going to support the industry that we're working against. So, yeah. My gosh. All right. So, everyone, I want you all to definitely check out Glen's books and yeah, get them. I've read. I haven't read the funny one.
Oh, read the funny one.
I need to read. What's the name of it again? Own Your Health.
Own Your Health. Yeah.
Right. And I need that. I need to own my health, right? And so where can people find you, Glen?
GlenMerzer.com. That's one N in Glen, Merzer.
Wonderful. Well, did you have anything else?
And also I have a YouTube show now. Please subscribe to it's called The Glen Merzer Show on YouTube. I'm trying to get to 2 million subscribers. I'm 1,999,000 several hundred short. So please help by subscribing, clicking to like or whatever you do with videos.
Well, we definitely will, and that's wonderful. We'll all head over there. Everyone hit subscribe here, and also to Vegan Knowledge, also to my channel. So we got a lot of great support. So thank you so much, Glen. This has been incredible.
Okay.
All right, and thanks everybody for watching, and we'll do the Climate Healers Namaste Vegan.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.